Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Long before the nightmares began, before the missing objects and the strange notes, I was just a 19-year-old college student, strapped for cash and desperate to find a place to live. That's truly where this story starts, not with a sudden chill or a shadow in the window, but with a profound need for a room of my own. It was a desperation that made me overlook obvious red flags, because I was simply too exhausted to be particular. It's the kind of ambition that feels like a heavy burden, pressing down until you can barely breathe. It was the summer before my sophomore year, a hot, sticky July that made the sidewalks feel like they'd melt my sneakers. I had just lost out on the student housing lottery, meaning dorm life was no longer an option. Our university had this policy: second-year students had to live off campus unless they had a medical exemption, which I didn't. So there I was, back in my small hometown of Deerfield, Illinois. Population less than 10,000, home of 3 churches, 2 diners, and 1 blinking red light. I was trying to figure out how to survive the upcoming school year without falling into debt or losing my mind. Off-campus housing near the university was a nightmare. Everything within walking distance was either crumbling apart or far beyond my price range. I had just enough saved from my part-time job at the campus bookstore to cover a deposit and maybe 2 months of rent if I stretched every penny. Beyond that, I was in deep trouble unless I found someone to share a space, and fast. I posted ads wherever I could: art school forums, local community boards, even Instagram. Quiet, dedicated student, looking for a roommate to split rent on a 2-bedroom apartment near downtown. Clean, non-smoker, serious about studies, message if interested. It wasn't much, but it was honest. I figured maybe some other student was in the same difficult situation. I posted it just before 10 at night, ate some leftover instant noodles, and went to bed, hoping for the best. At 10:03 p.m., I received a response. His name was Mr. Alistair Finch. He claimed to be a retired librarian and said he needed a quiet space for his book collection. He wrote that he was quiet, respectful, and enjoyed being around young, creative people. He had no pets, didn't smoke, and promised not to make noise. I reread his message 3 times, especially the part where he mentioned he was 78. It gave me pause. But who was I to question it? He sounded pleasant. His writing was polite, and he offered to pay half the rent without hesitation. He emphasized his love for quiet, that he didn't listen to music, and wouldn't be a bother. No one else had messaged me that entire week. By the end of August, I'd signed a lease for a small 2-bedroom apartment 5 blocks from the university. It was nothing fancy. Dusty windows, peeling paint, and a weird smell in the back room that never quite went away. But it was clean, and it was ours. The front had a large oak tree that shaded the entrance. I chose the larger room because Mr. Finch insisted. He said the high ceilings would be nice for my study space. He moved in with a dozen neatly stacked boxes and a single ancient globe. He claimed he didn't believe in excess. I remember watching him shuffle up the walkway in a long tweed coat and worn leather shoes. Despite the mild weather, his white hair was neatly combed, and he smelled faintly of old books and dust. He was short, barely reaching my chest, but his handshake was surprisingly firm. We settled in easily enough. Mr. Finch was quiet, almost invisible. I'd get home from working odd jobs, and the apartment would be still, save for the occasional soft rustle of paper as he turned a page. We didn't talk much, just polite hellos, shared smiles in the hallway, the occasional comment about the weather or my classes. Honestly, he was the dream roommate, until the humming started. The first night, I was studying on the floor when I heard it, a faint, low hum coming from behind his closed door. It wasn't unsettling at first. I thought maybe he was listening to an old radio or just clearing his throat. But it kept going, not words, no tune, just this steady, monotonous hum, spaced out like someone was concentrating on something I couldn't see. It felt off, like a sound without purpose. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. Each time I'd pause and listen, trying to convince myself it was harmless, just an old man with an odd habit. But something about it made my teeth ache. It wasn't just the sound, it was the fact that there was never any other noise, no voice, no movement, just humming, as if he were engaged in some internal private work. Then I started noticing the arrangements. At first I blamed it on my imagination. I'd glance up from my textbook and see a collection of small mundane objects on his desk, a dried leaf, a shiny button, a broken piece of glass, arranged in a precise, almost ritualistic pattern. He never said anything, just sat there, hands clasped in front of him, face unreadable, a small vague smile on his lips. When I greeted him, he'd nod and turn away. It kept happening, always quiet, always precise, until it wasn't. One night, in mid-November, I woke up to a faint clicking sound, soft, steady, from the other side of my bedroom door. I sat up, heart thudding, frozen in place. It wasn't knocking, it wasn't urgent, it was deliberate, rhythmic, like a lock being manipulated. I waited, hoping it would stop, but it didn't. I whispered, "Mr. Finch?" The clicking stopped instantly. Then a soft scraping sound, that same low, monotonous hum, just inches from my door. I didn't move. I couldn't move. My door didn't have a lock. The next morning, I waited for him in the common area. He was polishing a small, smooth stone when I asked, as casually as I could, "Hey, were you up late last night?" He blinked slowly. "Oh no, dear. I went to bed early. I thought I heard something outside my door," I said. He smiled wide and slow. "Dreams can be very vivid, can't they?" That was the last time I tried confronting him directly. That night, I shoved my heaviest desk in front of the door, just in case. It didn't help. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of the door frame creaking, not clicking, not humming. He was trying to push the door open. I pressed my weight against the desk, a lump forming in my throat, feeling the wood shift beneath each shove. Then stillness, silence, and then I saw it, a small dark object pressed to the tiny crack between the door and the frame, watching me. It didn't move. Then he whispered, loud, piercing my name, words I didn't understand. "It's time to be part of the collection." Slam, slam, slam. The desk thudded forward with each impact. I screamed back, pushing against it, yelling for him to stop, and just as suddenly as it began, silence. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, I was still pressed against the door. When I opened it, I nearly vomited. Every one of my small art tools, brushes, pencils, charcoal, had been snapped in half and pressed into the wood of the door. Some were buried to the hilt. Others hung loosely. The wood looked as if it had been shredded by steel. Mr. Finch didn't answer his door at first. One officer knocked. The other held me gently as I explained his arrangements. The humming, the attempts to open the door. They had to drag him out. He kicked and shrieked about lost fragments. He screamed that I wasn't complete, that I had ruined everything. He never looked at me. A month later, I'd moved into a 2-bedroom apartment across town with 2 other students. It was cramped, but I slept through the night. That felt like a miracle. The officer who followed up told me Alistair Finch didn't exist. No birth certificate, no tax records, no medical history. The ID was fake. The landlord said he paid him in cash after replying to an ad in a local paper. No background check, no emergency contact. I still don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I'll never forget that small dark object watching me, as if he wasn't just seeing me, he was selecting. So here's the question. If someone wanted to collect you, really collect you, how long do you think it would take before you noticed? I now understood what real fear was. Story 2. The Unseen Listener. Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks. I lived in a quiet corner of rural Georgia with my grandparents in a sprawling old farmhouse at the end of Cypress Lane. It was one of those places that looked peaceful on the outside, but held a kind of emptiness that could make your skin prickle if you stood in it too long. When I was a kid, 9 years old to be exact, I thought the world was just endless fields and quiet evenings, filled with nothing more than long days at school and helping out on the farm. But looking back now, I realized the intrusion that came that summer had been sitting quietly beside us for years, cloaked in silence, living just past our back 40 in a house that should have never had its curtains drawn perpetually. My name is Noah Jenkins. Back then I was just a gangly kid, with a habit of drawing too late into the night, and a head full of questions I was too afraid to ask aloud. Our house sat on a gentle rise right where the paved road of Cypress Lane turned into dirt, and the woods began to press in. The nearest neighbor was a good 20-minute drive, and it wasn't unusual to go a whole day without seeing anyone pass by. That stretch of road felt endless when you were walking home from Meadowlark Elementary, with your backpack digging into your shoulders and the cicadas buzzing loudly. There was one house, though, close enough to ours that I had to pass it every day. The Thorn Place. It looked like something out of a forgotten horror film. One story, faded paint, overgrown bushes. But what made it stick in my memory, even back then, were the windows. Every single one of them was covered by thick, opaque curtains, never opened. You couldn't see a thing inside, not even light. That alone was enough to send a shiver down my spine. But it was the silence inside that truly made my stomach clench. Mr. Thorne was older than anyone I'd ever met. Thin, stooped, pale as milk, with a wispy white beard like cobwebs across his chin. He wore the same clothes every day. Dark trousers, a button-down shirt with the sleeves buttoned at the wrist, and polished black shoes. He always seemed to be there when I passed by, just sitting on his porch swing, perfectly still, watching. His porch creaked under his weight, and when he spoke, it was with a voice that sounded like it hadn't been used in years. "Hello, Noah," he'd call out. He never said it like a greeting. It didn't feel like a neighborly hello. It felt more like an echo, like he was listening to my response. I never said anything back, just tightened my grip on my backpack straps and kept walking. My grandparents knew he was strange. Everyone in town did, but they didn't think he posed any danger. And back then, it was easy for adults to brush off a kid's discomfort as mere imagination. I never had the nerve to tell them everything I felt. The way his head tilted, just so, the way I felt, like I was being listened to. At night, lying in bed, I'd sometimes hear things outside, rustling leaves, the wind brushing against the old window frames. I'd try to tell myself it was just animals or the house settling, but some nights I'd hear something more, a faint scratching, a quiet shifting sound moving across the backyard, too slow to be an animal, too deliberate to be anything natural. I'd hold my breath and stay still under the covers, hoping it would go away. It usually did, until the night it didn't. It was late August. I remember the humidity clinging to my skin like a damp cloth. The old ceiling fan in my room was whirring, and the air felt heavy. I had just started to drift off when I heard a sound I knew wasn't the wind. A soft rhythmic scratching, then another. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I peeked through the curtain. There was a faint movement across the grass. Then it stopped. It tilted upward slowly toward my window. I scrambled back, breath caught in my throat. I knew it was him, even before I saw the outline. I'd seen that old battered wooden box before, leaned against the side of Mr. Thorne's porch during the day, but now it was propped against the side of our house, just below my bedroom window.
And then
I saw him, his face just inches from the glass, pale, empty eyes, that same unreadable expression. His fingers tapped lightly on the pane, slow and rhythmic. I screamed. My grandparents came running. I couldn't get the words out fast enough. He's at my window. He climbed up. My grandfather rushed out with a flashlight. My grandmother held me tight while I shook. But there was no one there. No box, no footprints, just an empty yard and the buzz of crickets. "Are you sure it wasn't a dream?" my grandfather asked gently, brushing my hair away from my face. "I'm sure," I said. "It was real. He was there. I saw him." They didn't say much after that. They checked the locks, told me to try to sleep, but I knew they didn't fully believe me. And then just like that, Mr. Thorne disappeared. The house went up for sale the following week. The curtains stayed drawn. The yard still wild and overgrown, but he was gone. No one saw him leave. No one even knew where he went. Some folks said he moved in with relatives in Alabama. Others thought he passed away, and no one noticed for a while. I never got an answer, just a vacancy where fear used to sit. I didn't sleep well for a long time after that. Even with the house empty, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, staring at the window, half expecting to hear that scratching again. I started locking it, double-checking, sometimes even wedging a book under the handle just to be sure. My grandparents said I was being paranoid, but I didn't care. I knew what I'd heard.
months passed. Then a young family moved in with their 2 children. They cleaned up the yard, pulled down the old curtains, added cheerful flower boxes under the windows. It looked like a home again. I tried to feel happy about it. I even watched the kids play in the front yard, laughing and chasing each other around the big oak tree. But inside, I still felt that tight, quiet fear that had lived with me for too long.
One evening, I found my grandmother sitting on the porch swing, sipping iced tea and staring at the horizon. I sat beside her, the air cool and soft with the smell of cut grass. "Grandma," I said after a long silence, "do you remember the man who used to live next door?" She nodded, but didn't speak. "I never told you everything," I said. "I was scared you'd think I was lying." Her expression softened. "Noah, sometimes grown-ups don't understand what kids see or feel." I should have listened better. There was comfort in her words. Small, but real. I nodded, but deep down, I knew it didn't erase what had happened. Years later, I still carry that night with me, still flinch when I hear a soft scratching sound or see a faint movement in the dark. People think danger arrives loudly and quickly, but the truth is, sometimes it creeps in slowly and quietly, behind drawn curtains, through the silence of a place that feels too still. I wonder sometimes, what if our dog, Buster, hadn't barked that night? What if my scream hadn't startled him? What if I hadn't pushed my desk against the wall earlier that week? Would I still be here? And more importantly, how many others stay quiet because they think no one will believe them? Story 3. The Ever-Present Observer. Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks. Who never thought I'd leave the city for good? Not truly. Sarah and I used to toss the idea around in that vague, someday kind of way. When the kids are older, when we finally catch up on bills, when work gets less hectic. But last spring something shifted. We were eating cold Chinese takeout from the boxes, sitting on the couch while our baby cried in her crib, and it hit me all at once. The ceiling above our kitchen had leaked again from the upstairs neighbors. Mildew was creeping in along the baseboards. The landlord, as always, shrugged it off. A robbery had occurred a few blocks away the week before. I looked at Sarah and said, "What if we just left?" And for once she didn't laugh, or say we were too broke or tired. She simply looked at me and said, "Yes, maybe we should." 3 months later, we packed everything we earned into a moving truck and drove 2.5 hours out of the city to a place called Harmony Ridge, population 703. Our new home was a quaint blue cottage, sitting on 3 acres of rolling hills and wildflowers. The porch creaked, the floors leaned in spots, and the bathroom sink dripped, but the air smelled like pine needles, and the wind rustling through the trees sounded like a lullaby. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like a fresh beginning. The town was small, truly small. 1 general store, a post office, and a single pump gas station. We were 35 minutes from anything larger. The people waved when they passed, whether they knew you or not. For the first few weeks, it was almost dreamlike. The baby slept soundly through the night. I started a small vegetable patch. Sarah put up new curtains, and we painted the nursery together. There were moments when I thought perhaps we'd finally found a place to grow old, and then I met Mr. Gable. It was early April. The last of the winter chill had just started to lift. In the mornings, I was walking back from the mailbox, arms full of bills and flyers, when I noticed him across the gravel road. He was sitting in a rocking chair on his porch, whittling a piece of wood with an old pocket knife. He stood when he saw me. He was tall and gaunt, with wispy gray hair and a face that looked 20 years younger than his posture suggested. "Morning," he called out, his voice clear and raspy. "Good morning," I replied, smiling. "You must be our neighbor." He crossed the road in long, slow strides. "You're the ones who bought the Henderson place." "That's us. I'm Mark Gable," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was dry and strong. "Been out here my whole life. Most of us around here are related, more or less. My brother Tom's down that way, and my niece is just to the north of you." His eyes were a bright, piercing green, the kind that don't blink much. I estimated he was perhaps in his late 60s. Later that night, Sarah told me Mr. Gable was 91. That was the first detail that didn't quite sit right with me. Mr. Gable came by a few days later, while I was raking leaves near the shed. He didn't say hello, just walked right up, as if he owned the place. "Just so you know," he said, nodding at the yard, "you ought to keep that fence repaired, keeps the deer out, and other things." I blinked at him. "Oh, the back fence. Certainly, we were planning to patch it next weekend." He stared at me, his face blank for a second, before forcing a thin smile. "Still best to keep things secure." Then he paused and added, "If you need anything, it's best to send your wife or call my son. Best not to come to me directly." I laughed awkwardly. "You mean if we need tools or something?" "In general," he said, and looked me over in a way that wasn't sexual. It was colder, more clinical. You'd look more settled if you wore darker colors. Before I could respond, he turned and walked off. When I told Sarah that night, she shrugged. He's just old-fashioned. He probably thinks he's being helpful. I wasn't so sure. A week later, Mr. Gable's son, Tom, stopped by while I was fixing a broken gate and invited me over for coffee. He seemed gruff, quiet, always out tending his beehives or chopping wood on his porch. I thought perhaps I'd just misunderstood Mr. Gable. Maybe this was just how people were here, blunt, set in their ways. A little odd. His house was orderly, filled with hunting trophies and old wooden furniture. The kitchen smelled like sawdust and strong coffee. We made small talk about farming and weather and local gossip. Then his phone rang. "Sorry, 1 second," he said, stepping into the hallway. I sat alone in the kitchen for what felt like several minutes. I stood up, stretched a little, and casually glanced down the hall. At the end was a door. Unlike the rest of the house, which was robustly rustic, this door looked newer, thicker, out of place. The paint around the frame was fresh, and there were 3 heavy-duty padlocks stacked horizontally. I squinted. The wood beneath the handle was stained with deep, dark patches. I took a hesitant step forward. "Just storage," Tom said behind me. Too quickly, I jumped. He was standing in the hallway now, smiling wider than before. "Old hunting shed, unsafe roof. We don't go in there." He ushered me back to the kitchen, a little too gently. I didn't ask anything else. That night, walking past Tom's house toward our mailbox, I saw it. One of the small basement windows was just above ground. There was an eye pressed to it. Not a handprint, an eye. Large, dark, perfectly still. No blink, no movement. Just a clean eye pressed hard into the glass, like it had been waiting. I told Sarah. She said maybe it was just a reflection or my imagination, but there was no light, no movement inside. Just that one perfect, unblinking eye. We tried to ignore it. We focused on the house, the baby, the chores. We pretended it was all fine. Then came the night the baby started crying. At 1 a.m., Sarah went to check. I looked out the window and saw fresh tire tracks through the mud leading toward the woods. Our security cameras were completely blank. Not glitchy, not fuzzy, just wiped clean. The footage for that night was gone. I replaced the SD cards, set up cloud backups. None of us talked about what we were thinking. The last straw came a few days later. I was fixing a broken fence post, enjoying the cool wind and sun, when I felt it, that buzz at the back of your neck when someone's watching you. I turned, and there he was, Mr. Gable, standing at the edge of our field. No wave, no smile, just staring. Then he pointed, not at me, but at the lone oak tree. "Don't plant there," he said, then turned and walked away. I hadn't planned to plant, not until he said that. The next afternoon, Sarah was in town, and the baby was napping. I grabbed a shovel and walked to the spot. The earth was soft, as if it had been disturbed before. About 7 inches down, I hit something solid. It was a metal box, rusted and dented. I pulled it out, dragged it behind the shed, and forced it open. Inside were photographs. Dozens, black and white, brittle with age. Every photo showed a family standing in front of our cottage. Different people, different decades, babies, children, parents, but in every single photo, standing off to the side, was Mr. Gable, unchanged, same eyes, same face, same Mr. Gable. I stared for what felt like hours. My hands were shaking. I put the photos in a bag and walked straight to Mr. Gable's house. His wife answered, a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. I need to speak with Mr. Gable, I said. She looked at me as if I'd asked something impossible. I'm sorry, she said gently. Harold passed away nearly 4 years ago. I blinked. No, that's not possible. He was just at our fence yesterday. She shook her head. That's not possible, she repeated softly. Back at home, I laid the photos out on the floor. One had a year scrawled on the back. 1983, another 1957. The same house, different families, always Harold just off to the side, watching. I went online that night, dug through county records, archived newspapers. The cottage had changed owners over a dozen times in 65 years. Some families moved abruptly, others vanished without selling. One article mentioned a family of 3, presumed missing. No foul play ever confirmed. I showed everything to Sarah. Neither of us slept. We tried to move a week later. The U-Haul wouldn't start. The old car overheated. Our internet cut out the moment I tried to send an email. When I called the sheriff, he came by and looked around with this tired, patient expression. Some places don't like being left behind, he said. Then he smiled. It was the same smile Harold wore in every photo. That night, someone knocked at 3:15 a.m. Sarah checked, no one there. But on the porch was a fresh photograph. Us standing in front of the house. And there, off to the side, was Harold smiling. What if the real danger isn't a person, but the land that never forgets who you are or lets you leave? Story 4. The apartment that watched. Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks. My life was quiet in the kind of way you don't notice until it's gone. I was 26, working remote contract jobs in content writing, and living just outside Austin, Texas, in a mid-sized apartment complex called Cedar Ridge Flats. It was one of those cookie-cutter places with beige stucco, perfectly manicured hedges, and laminated flyers taped to stairwells about noise complaints and community barbecue days. The rent was just affordable enough to make sense, and the location, close enough to everything but tucked far enough from the city, felt like the right kind of middle ground. I lived with my best friend Emily Chen. She was 25, sharp-tongued, fast-talking, and completely allergic to boredom. Emily had an opinion about everything, a laugh you could hear through walls, and a weird talent for remembering every single line from obscure horror movies. We met freshman year of college, and somehow never drifted. When we moved into Unit 203 in Building D, we both felt like we were doing something right, like we'd leveled up. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, laminate floors that creaked in weird spots, and a little balcony that overlooked the courtyard and a row of old pecan trees. But it felt safe, familiar, ours. Emily's older brother's a police officer, so she's always been hyper-aware of safety. The first thing she did after we moved in was install a smart doorbell camera and a reinforced lock. I rolled my eyes, teased her about acting like we were prepping for a zombie apocalypse, but she didn't budge. She said, "I'd rather look paranoid than be sorry." I used to laugh. I don't laugh anymore. The first few months were boring in the best way. We had neighbors who nodded at us in passing. An older woman downstairs who occasionally dropped off homemade cookies, and a noisy cat across the hall who yowled like it was a competitive sport. The woman with the cookies, Mrs. Rodriguez, moved out in January. We noticed the for rent sign on their door a few days later. Emily assumed the unit would stay empty a while, since our property manager was notoriously picky, but by early February, we saw a moving truck in the lot. The new tenant moved in alone, mid-40s, perhaps older. He was thin, almost gaunt, always wearing long coats, even when the weather started warming up. He never introduced himself, never nodded, never made eye contact. Sometimes I'd hear his door lock turning, or his keys jingling, but that was it. No greetings, no small talk, nothing. His blinds stayed drawn all day. His lights barely came on at night. Emily said maybe he worked nights at a hospital or a factory, but I wasn't convinced. Then came the sounds. At first, it was just a faint scratching noise, late at night, like nails being dragged across a surface. We were watching a movie. The first time we heard it, it was low and slow, as if someone were working on something delicate, with effort. We muted the TV. The noise stopped. We looked at each other and shrugged it off. But it kept happening every night, sometimes at midnight, sometimes closer to 4 a.m. Scratching, then a soft tapping, slow, measured. We told ourselves maybe he was fixing something. Maybe he had insomnia, but you can only hear the same sound so many nights before it stops sounding innocent. Emily was the first to say it. "It's not normal," she whispered one night, as we both sat in silence, listening. "Nobody scratches at their walls at 4 a.m. every single day." The sounds escalated. Muffled whispers, low and hurried, as if he were arguing with someone, except we never heard another voice, just his agitated, raspy, as if he were fighting a ghost or losing a battle in his own head. We didn't call the police. We didn't complain. We weren't sure what to say. "Hi, our neighbor sounds like a horror movie character. Could you check that out?" We tried to laugh it off, but we started locking our doors tighter at night. Emily stopped sleeping without her emergency whistle within reach. I moved a heavy flashlight next to my nightstand. One Tuesday night, things changed. I had just come home from a late shift around midnight. Emily was already in bed at 1:30 a.m. She got up for water and saw him standing in front of our door, not knocking, not moving, just standing there. She froze, said hello, in a quiet voice. He didn't respond, didn't blink, just turned slowly and walked back to his apartment. She told me in the morning, trying to laugh, but her eyes were tight and scared. I checked the doorbell footage. He stood there for almost 3 minutes, staring into the peephole. 3 minutes, completely still. That's when the alert started. Motion detected every night between 1 and 3 a.m. We'd get a ping, sometimes twice. He'd walk past our door slowly, as if he were doing rounds. Other times, he'd stop, stand there, or worse, reach for the doorknob. Once we caught him humming into the keyhole. We played it back, muted, then turned the volume up. It was unintelligible, raspy, and broken, but deliberate, as if he were talking to us directly, or to someone else. We didn't know which was worse. Then came the marks, long, shallow grooves across the surface of our front door. Not once, not twice, over and over, new ones appearing every couple nights, as if someone was scratching with a sharp tool or something sharper. We reported it. The leasing office barely blinked. "We'll look into it," they said. "We'll check the hallway camera." A day later, they admitted the camera hadn't worked for months. We showed them the doorbell footage. "Well," they said, "he hasn't technically done anything illegal." I remember the way Emily's face fell. She didn't say a word until we got back inside. Then she slammed the door and muttered, "They won't care until he's trying to get in through the mail slot." We started, doubling down, locking the door, reinforcing it with a chair, leaving hallway lights on all night. We even pushed a heavy chest of drawers in front of our shared bedroom door. We didn't talk about it anymore. We just acted. Then came the worst night. A Friday. It was 1:45 a.m. I had just ended a video call with my sister. Emily had dozed off beside me on the couch. Then 3 hard, fast thuds on the door. I froze. Emily jolted upright. I grabbed my phone and opened the doorbell app. My hands were shaking. He was there, shirtless, wide-eyed, pressed up against the peephole, staring into it, as if he could see us through it. Then he whispered something deliberate, rhythmic. We couldn't make it out. Then he shrieked. It wasn't human. It was the kind of sound that rips into your stomach, the kind that makes your body move before your brain catches up. We ran, locked ourselves in the bedroom, pushed the chest of drawers harder against the door. I called 911. The dispatcher was calm, as if this was normal. She told us to stay put. Stay quiet. Don't engage. We listened. We crouched in the corner of the room. Emily's hand locked around her pepper spray, her knees shaking. I remember the sound of my own heartbeat. More than anything else, the banging stopped. Then silence. Police arrived 38 minutes later. By the time they knocked, it was like nothing had happened. He didn't answer. They tried the handle. Nothing. Unless he broke in or had a weapon. One officer said, "There's not much we can do." That was it. That was all they had. Emily didn't say anything. She walked into her room and pulled her suitcase from under the bed. We packed before the sun rose. We were gone. We stayed with her uncle 2 towns over and filed another report. Nothing ever came of it. The leasing office said they'd investigate. The apartment across from ours stayed occupied for months. We never heard from him again. We never learned his name. Never found out why he picked our door. Why he stood there whispering. What he thought he'd find inside. All we knew was that we listened to our fear. We didn't stay to figure it out. And maybe that saved us. But I still think about him. Still hear that whisper sometimes in my sleep. Still wonder what would have happened if we hadn't left. And now I ask you, what would you have done? To story 5, The Hidden Presence Below. Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks.
I never thought I'd come back to Fairhaven. For most of my adult life, I'd done everything I could to leave it behind. I spent years chasing bigger cities, louder lives, things that made me feel important. But after the burnout, after everything, I didn't have much left in the tank. My job had drained me to the bone, then let me go as if I'd never mattered in the first place. I was tired, mentally, physically. So when my parents called and told me they were moving to Florida and offered me the old house, I said yes without really thinking. Perhaps I was too numb to argue, or maybe deep down, I needed some quiet place to fall apart.
The house was still the same low-slung bungalow, tucked at the edge of town between 2 quiet streets. It looked smaller than I remembered, but perhaps that's just what time does. The lawn had gone patchy, the front steps creaked in new places, but it was mine now, and it felt like the only thing left that I didn't have to fight for. It was late July when I moved in, and the summer air was thick like honey. I spent the first couple of weeks working on small repairs, fixed a leaking faucet, replaced a broken light fixture, tried to make it feel like mine. The cellar, though, that was where I really found myself settling. It used to be just storage when I was a kid. I turned it into a workshop, started cleaning out cobwebs on the far wall where a damp patch had spread over the years. There was something comforting about the cool air down there, the stillness. It made me feel separated from everything that had gone wrong in my life. I was sanding a piece of old wood near the workbench, When the first text came in, it was around 11:30 p.m., and I had my headphones on, half distracted by some old rock music playing in the background. I barely looked at the message when it buzzed through. It was from Martha Jenkins, my next-door neighbor, 60s-something. Gossipy in the way only small-town folks can be. But she meant well, always did. "Hey honey, just saw a tall shadow move into your cellar. Wanted to let you know." I didn't even pause at first. Texted back with one hand, still balancing the sander. "You sure?" "Pretty sure I'd notice." Her reply came quickly. "Yep, it ducked under your side door, real tall. Thought maybe you had a delivery." That made me stop. I hadn't seen another human being in hours. I spun around in my chair and scanned the room. Everything was exactly where I left it. Tools on the shelves, sawdust in the air, music still low from my speaker. The side door to the cellar was closed, but I always left it like that. It never shut properly, unless you latched it from the outside. I muted the music and stood perfectly still. No footsteps, no shadows, nothing. I walked over to the door, cracked it an inch, peeked outside. Empty yard. The old shed I never used, sitting just where it always had, and the wooden fence beyond. No sign of movement. I texted her again. "I'm down here alone. Are you totally sure?" She didn't respond. I chalked it up to a mistake. Maybe she saw someone walking along the path and thought they turned in. Maybe her porch light played tricks. She was old, not blind, but still, it's late. People get jumpy. I went back to my chair. At 12:15 a.m., she texted again. It just left. My heart skipped. I stared at the screen. "Left from where?" "From your cellar. Walked out and down toward your shed." I tried to follow with my flashlight, but it never came out the other side. It just didn't. That made my stomach clench. There's nowhere to go back there. The shed sits in a dead space between the house and fence. If something walked in and didn't walk out, they'd still be there, or they'd jump the fence. But who does that? I got up and did a slow lap around the cellar. No extra footprints, nothing out of place. Just my sneakers squeaking against the concrete floor and the faint smell of damp earth. It was like no one had ever been there. Still, the unease crawled under my skin. I grabbed a flashlight, popped the small grated window, and climbed out the narrow opening near the ceiling. I'd done it before in summer when I'd locked myself out. It wasn't graceful, but I made it out. The cellar door opened fine from the outside. No jam, no resistance. I checked around the shed. Empty. No tracks in the dirt. Nothing disturbed. Then I walked across to Martha's place. She was sitting on her porch like always, teacup in hand, blanket over her knees, porch light flickering like a tired moth. "You okay?" she asked before I even got close. "Yes," I said, brushing dirt from my jeans. "Just what exactly did you see?" She gave me this long look over her glasses. Tall shadow, dressed all in black, hood up, I think. Moved slowly, as if it were real comfortable. Came up to your door, stood there for a second, then let itself in.
"Could you see its face?"
She shook her head. "No, it stayed in the shadows, but it wasn't some drunk kid, or whatever. It moved like it knew where it was going." I ran a hand through my hair, still damp from the cellar's cool air. "You're sure, Ian?" she said, setting her mug down. "I'm old, not foolish. That thing walked into your house." Then with a smirk, she added, "Was it friendly?" I rolled my eyes. "Seriously?" She shrugged. "What? I can't try to lighten the mood." We walked home, jumped the fence, and did a full check of the house. Upstairs, downstairs, closets, under beds, cabinets. Nothing, everything in place. But I couldn't relax. I stayed up pacing, reorganizing a bookshelf that didn't need it. straightening the picture frames on the wall, as if that somehow made things safer. Then came the thud. Not a crash, not a creak. A thud like something heavy shifting or hitting a beam. I stopped cold, heart racing. I grabbed the nearest heavy object, an old metal pipe, and crept down the stairs. The cellar looked untouched. Tools where I left them, air still cool, no broken shelves, no mess. But the side door was jammed again, totally stuck, same as before. This time, there was condensation on the inside of the window. I stared at it for a long time, chest tight. It hadn't been there earlier. The room wasn't cold enough for condensation. I pressed my palm against the glass. It was cold, as if something had rested there for a long time. I tried everything to get the door open. Crowbar, shoving. Nothing worked. Finally, I grabbed my phone to call someone, but it was dead, completely dead. No red light, no power icon, nothing. It had been charging all day. I put it back on the charger. No change. Then an hour later, the screen flickered, battery 1%. By the time it crawled to 50%, I tried the door again. It opened without a sound. That was 6 nights ago. I haven't gone back in the cellar since. I don't know what Martha saw. I don't know why the door locked itself twice. I don't understand the condensation on the glass, or the way my phone drained like that. But I do know I was alone. At least, I thought I was. And here's the question I can't stop asking. If you knew someone or something had been inside your home and left without a trace, would you ever feel safe there again? Story 6. The Unsettled Foundations. Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks.
I bought the house 3 years ago after my promotion. It was built in the early 70s, a 2-bedroom ranch in a quiet corner of town with an unfinished basement, a sprawling backyard, and just enough space for a man making a fresh start. The price was almost suspiciously low, but I convinced myself it was just the market. The place needed work, certainly, but it felt like something I could make mine, a fresh beginning. I painted the living room myself, replaced the torn linoleum in the kitchen, even built shelves in the garage for tools I barely used. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine.
The neighborhood was quiet. Young families mostly, some retired couples. Mr. Henderson, who lived next door, was friendly in a gruff sort of way. He mowed his lawn twice a week, usually on Tuesdays, and gave me gardening tips without me asking. He said he liked to keep tabs on the street since his wife passed. He noticed everything. At first, I found it a little annoying. Later, I'd be grateful. The first time I heard the sound, it was past 1 a.m. I was in bed, halfway between sleep and dreams, when something scraped under the floorboards, not the casual pop of settling wood. This was deliberate, light, as if someone were dragging something across the basement floor right beneath me. I sat up, listened hard, but it stopped. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the old pipes or a cat outside. I didn't go check. I was too tired, and honestly I didn't want to go down there. A few nights later it happened again. Same time, same soft scrape. I grabbed a flashlight, went down to the basement with my heart hammering in my chest. The light cast long shadows on the concrete walls, bouncing off the boxes I hadn't touched in months. Nothing moved. No signs of anyone breaking in. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just adjusting to living alone again. Still, I started locking the basement door at night. One Tuesday morning, I noticed the lock on the basement door had been tampered with, as if someone had tried to pry it open using something thin. That's when I started taking it seriously.
I installed a deadbolt. I kept a heavy wrench on my nightstand. I told a couple of friends. but they brushed it off. Old houses settle, man. Stop watching those ghost shows. I laughed along with them, but I kept my ears open at night. Then came the evening the door jammed. It was a Thursday. I was working on a leaky pipe under the bathroom sink when I realized I left a joint compound in the basement. I went to get it. The basement door opened normally, but when I tried to come back up, it wouldn't budge. The knob turned, but the door stuck as if it were being held from the other side. I knocked, then shoved it. Nothing. I pounded harder, now sweating, heart racing. My phone was in my pocket. No signal, not even one bar.
I tried to calm down, waited 15 minutes, tried again. Suddenly, the door opened, as smoothly as silk. When I checked my phone, it was backed to full signal, battery at 59%. Everything worked fine that night. I bolted the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and texted Mr. Henderson. All I said was, "Did you see anything unusual?" He replied 7 minutes later, "He's not in your yard anymore." That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. I decided to sleep in the spare room upstairs. It was always too hot up there, but I didn't care. I shut off all the lights, grabbed a kitchen knife, and locked the bedroom door behind me. I lay on top of the covers, listening. Every creak sounded like footsteps. I must have dozed off eventually, but it wasn't restful. I dreamt of slithering things, long bodies, and thin joints, something hiding just beneath the boards. The next morning, the sun made the curtains glow, as if nothing had ever happened. Warm, normal light. I almost laughed. Perhaps I was spiraling. Stress, isolation, caffeine, late-night paranoia. I told myself all of it. Made sense. Then my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Henderson again. "Hey, just wanted to let you know my camera picked up something weird around 3:15 a.m. Looks like someone crawled out of your basement window. Want me to send the clip?" I didn't even text back. I called. He picked up on the second ring. "Hello? Yes? Send it right now." "Are you sure?" His voice was quiet. "You sound..." "Send it, please." 2 minutes later, the video came through. It showed the side of my house, grainy but clear. At 3:15 a.m., the basement window slid open from the inside. Then something crawled out. Crawled, not walked. It moved low, as if it were trying to stay hidden. Long limbs, disjointed, folding itself in impossible ways. It was tall, far too tall for the window, but it squeezed through as if it had no bones. When it stood, it looked human. Sort of. Arms too long, neck too short, as if its head sat directly on its shoulders. It didn't glance at the camera, just stood still for almost a full minute, then walked across my backyard toward the tall hedge. It passed my compost bin, then disappeared into the shadows. My throat tightened. I felt sick. I called the police. They showed up quickly. 2 officers, polite but skeptical. I showed them the video. They watched it, exchanged a look, then did a sweep of the basement. They found nothing. No prints, no broken lock, nothing missing. But the window was unlocked, and one of my tools, an old hammer, was lying just under the window, dusted in debris, as if it had been moved recently. I hadn't touched that thing in years. They said it was probably a squatter. Perhaps someone slipped in while I was out, hid in the crawl space, then panicked and left. That video, they said, could have been tampered with. Glitchy cameras make weird images. They told me to keep the doors locked and call if anything else happened. That night, I dragged my dresser in front of the basement door. I checked every lock twice, pulled my barbecue grill around to block the basement window from the outside. I even shoved a folded cardboard box under the doorknob for good measure. Still, Around 2 a.m. I heard it, one soft creak beneath my bed, then another, slower this time, purposeful. Then, just before it stopped, came a new sound, a light tap from the ceiling below me. Once, then again. I didn't go check. I didn't sleep. By morning, I made up my mind. I rented a storage unit and started clearing out the basement, hauled everything out myself, box by box. I sealed the basement window with plywood and heavy-duty screws. I poured concrete inside the frame until it was bricked solid. I hired a guy off Craigslist to finish the job, paid him cash, told him it was for security. He nodded, didn't ask questions. Mr. Henderson moved out a few weeks later, said his daughter in Colorado needed help with the grandchildren, but he didn't even put his house up for sale, just left it empty. I think he didn't want to live next to me anymore.
I still live here. I still love my house. It's quiet again most nights. Peaceful, but every so often, deep in the dark, I swear I hear something move beneath the floorboards. Slow, careful, waiting. I tell myself it's the plumbing, the pipes, the house settling, but I know better. Something was in my basement that night, and I don't think it ever left. So, if it were you, would you dare go back down there?